Okay, everyone, so we're back with our city bike data from September, and I have made an edit to this file, which is that I have eliminated all but the first 10,000 rows. So just to make this a little bit more manageable, I've, as I said, sorted down the data, which, I mean, interestingly enough, right, the first 10,000 rows, if I just skip to the bottom here of my data set that I've left, gets me up to just about noon. On the first day, right? So that's 10,000 trips that were started between midnight and noon on the 1st of September in 2016. So if you have if you want a sense of the scope of the data or the usage of the city bike system, it gives you kind of a nice impression. So what we're going to work on now is we're going to work on some of our summary statistics. Now, the first thing that we have to think about when we are looking at doing, this kind of summary statistic contextual analysis is, of course, what is a relevant context, right? So obviously we're looking at a single data set, that's the city bike data. We're now looking within a single 12-hour time period, which, actually is probably maybe not what we would look at, right? Especially, but we always need a rationale for why we've chosen the subset of data that we have. And we're always looking at a subset of data. In this case, this is what I would call a convenient sample, right? We're doing it because we're, for the purposes of this exercise, we want to be able to understand it. But, whether I look at a day of data or a week of data or, a month or a year, you have to have a reason, basically, why you're looking at that subset. So for our purposes, again, we're looking at roughly the first 12 hours because that is, a sort of manageable size for us. And then, of course, we want to say, okay, well, what's a sort of a further way to look at this? We could look at this data in the aggregate, but ultimately the point of identifying this context, and we're also looking is to provide frames of reference, and then ultimately also to look for patterns. So the way that I'm going to approach this for the time being, the way that we're going to look at this is I'm actually going to look at the start station, right? So we're going to say, okay, for city by station X, do we see any patterns thus far? Or what is the sort of frame of reference, the context for that station? We can imagine that, a station that's close to Grand Central might have certain patterns of usage that differ from one that is in downtown Brooklyn, for example. I have no idea what those might be, which is exactly why we're going to do this analysis. So you'll notice that we actually very helpfully have the sort of the full name of the English language name of the city bike station in here. And it looks like it's organized probably by start station. Yeah. So we see that it's by start station here. So St. Mark's Place and 2nd Avenue looks to be number 236. So as usually is the case with a data set like this, although there are obviously English language descriptors, it's very common to provide some kind of identifying number or slug, text ID that's short, unique, easy to replicate, easy to identify, right? So, computers don't handle things like spaces and ampersands and all of this stuff very well. Obviously, we could imagine that if, the ID being sent was that, you might have typos introduced. That's obviously more common with human entered data. This is obviously information is being automatically sent by the city bike system because it itself is digital. But we tend to rely on identifiers that are short and unique. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by sorting my data by the start station ID. Okay, and so for those of you who maybe have a little less experience with Excel, the first key thing here is that I'm going to highlight all my data, and to do that, if I click on the sort of the letter column, the letter area here, it's going to highlight the entire column automatically. I'm going to drag it across until I have all of my columns and rows highlighted. And then it's a little hard to see here, my recording window. Here we have, okay, so I've chosen under data. I'm going to choose sort, and I'm going to click the little down pointing arrow. I'm not going to do this. This is the sort of automatic, it guesses which column you want to sort by. That's not going to be very useful for us. We're going to choose a little one and choose custom sort. And this is much better. We see that we can actually sort by multiple things at once. So in this case, I'm just going to, because my data is already sorted by timestamp, right, which I can see just by looking at the start time here, I'm going to go ahead and sort by start station ID, right? You actually don't even see the entire thing here. And I'm going to go smallest to largest because it doesn't matter. Okay, and so now I can see collected within this 12-hour period all of these start pickups. In fact, it goes a little past noon. It looks, oh no, sorry, that's the pickup time, right? So the drop-off time is going to be later, but the pickup time goes till just before noon. And for my purposes, I am going to look at a subset of this data. I'm going to look at station ID 212. So now that they're nicely sorted in order, I'm going to come down here and look for the station ID that I want to work with, which is this 212, which is West 16th Street and the High Line, right? So if you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. And what I'm going to do to make this easier on myself is I'm actually going to copy. So now I've done the same thing that I did up at the top, I can do at the side. So if I choose the row number, if that's where I place my mouse, it's going to select the entire row. I can then drag it down. Another way to do this is I can highlight this. If I hold the shift key and just click the last row like that, it automatically selects everything in between. I find that particularly handy when I have to select rows of data that cross over screen shifts, right, that are more than one screen high. Otherwise it can be very frustrating, especially if you're scrolling and you have to highlight a large amount of data. The lag can be really annoying. So if you sort of click that first row, or equally you can do it with a column, hold down shift and then just look for the end point, you can then just select that and it will automatically highlight everything in between. So I'm going to copy this now, and down here I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm actually going to paste this. I'm going to paste it into the second row because I want to make sure to copy my headers in here. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top so I can keep an eye on what the column meanings are. So I'm going to paste this in, and so now I'm going to save this, obviously, but I, at this point, right, I can no longer save this as a CSV, and the reason for that is that CSV is just a flat file. It doesn't support things like multiple sheets, which we're using here. So I'm going to say save, and oh, I see, this wants me to save it in a different format. So I'm going to go File, Save As. Usually you can sort of choose it from before there, but so I'm going to go back up to Excel format, and I'm going to save it with the new file name. And now I know that I have this, and in fact I'm going to call this Station 212 Analysis. Okay, so what do I want to do with this? Well, the thing that we, again, so in looking for context, we tend to look for measures of central tendency and distribution. So the thing that leaps out to me as, obviously potentially interesting here is the trip duration. How long are the rides, that people take between midnight and noon and actually I don't know what day of the week this is. That would almost certainly be relevant to our analysis, right? How long are these rides? So you'll have done your reading, sort of what the formulas are for these analyses. The first one we're going to start out with is the mean. Why? It's straightforward. It's easy to do. It is add up all the values and divide by the number of instances there are. So if you look, as I highlight in this upper left-hand corner, right where it says the name of the cell that I'm on, when I'm selecting things, it tells me how many rows I have selected. So I have 29 rows, 29 data points. So I'm going to go right ahead and I'm going to label this. I can do this anywhere that I want, but I'm going to do it down here. And so I'm going to start by calculating the mean. And so to do that, I'm going to add up all of take the sum of all of those values, and then I'm going to divide by the number of individual values that I have. So to start a formula in Excel, I'm going to type the equal sign. This lets it know that what's coming is a formula and not meant to be represented as literal representative text. The formula is sum. And again, when I name a formula, when I am giving information to that formula, I use parentheses, round parentheses, and we're going to see these again later on when we work with Python. That equal sign and then sum, open round parentheses, and then I can actually just highlight all of the rows that I want to be part of this. And then I'm going to close the parentheses, And when I hit enter, that's going to give me the sum. Now, that's the sum. Obviously, what I need is the sum divided by 29. So right in the same cell here, I'm going to use the slash, which is the division symbol, and then I'm just going to type 29. So here I have the mean, which is the sum of every value divided by the number of values that I have, the number of readings that I have, 29. So my mean trip duration is 583.7 seconds, okay? This is obviously calculating out to many more significant digits than we actually have. In fact, I would probably want to round this simply to 584. And the reason why is because the greatest precision of my reading, any derived measure of this data set, right? So a mean is a derived measure. I've added things up and divided them. That derived measure cannot be more precise than my original data, right? My original data has 0 significant digits because it's whole numbers. I can't then all of a sudden have something that's actually, theoretically precise to 5 or 6 digits. You don't gain precision by doing those kinds of arithmetic operations. So in fact, I'm going to go ahead and format this. And actually it's right below the window here, but under format cells, one of the things that I can do is it's going to ask me about numbers, and it's going to say, how precise should I be? And I'm actually going to take these decimal places down to 0 because I can't genuinely be any more precise than that. So that's my mean. The median is actually also very straightforward to determine. All I have to do here is, in order to find the median, I have to find the list has to be sorted. So again, I'm going to highlight my rows along the left-hand side here so that I have all of the data. So I'm keeping everything together. It's going to sort every item in that row by the thing that I sort on, which is going to be the trip duration. And again, I'm going to go back to my data sort here and choose custom sort. The column I'm going to choose is trip duration, smallest to largest, and all of a sudden, voila, I have the smallest to largest. Now the median, in this case, which is a list with an odd number of rows, is very straightforward because it's just the middle row. So if I have 29 items, which I do here, right? I can tell by doing this selection count. Then it's going to be the 15th row, basically. So it's going to be 1 plus 15 is 16. It's going to be right here. So I'm just going to highlight this. If you want to just do this with the shortcuts up top, I go back to my Home tab and click the highlight. As I said, just the middle value. So my median right there is going to be 411, no problem. For some reason, this is doing a weird formatting, probably because this column overall is formatted like a date. It's looking to make this into a date. So again, I'm going to go ahead and actually for all of these, just because I'm going to put some more calculations there, I'm also going to put these down. So I'm going to format these as numbers with a precision level, decimal place is 0, and there we have. Now, why it interpreted the date that it came up with when I put in 411 is something we can talk about another time as well. All right, so I'm going to take a pause here. When we come back, what I'm going to look at are the quartiles and interquartile ranges and talk about how those help us understand the distribution of the data that we're looking at. So I will see you all in a few minutes.